Over the past few days, some cities in China have eased restrictions on epidemic prevention and control, but the road to reopening will be long and bumpy. If infection rates rise further this winter, communist authorities may tighten controls again. I think this is hard to say. When they want, they just change the measures. For example, it's very strange to have a mall open the next day, Saturday, when you were only notified on Friday night. Suddenly, it is open. It's out of my expectations. I think there are more and more cases, but the mall is surprisingly opened again. Dine-in is not yet possible, but I guess it will be soon. For example, after more than 100 days of lockdown in Urumqi, Xinjiang, the government announced on December 4th that it would gradually lift the lockdown under intense public pressure and that production would resume. But many local factories and brick-and-mortar stores aren't ready to open up. In reality, they can only lie flat and do nothing. Even if the lockdown is lifted, we aren't ready to open up the business. This summarizes the sorrow and frustration of many entrepreneurs who own real businesses. Today, I talked to two of my friends in the restaurant business. Although the city is lifting the restrictions, they are not ready to resume business. A lot of their staff have gone, and business is not doing good. As long as the door opens, labor costs and other fees are all coming. More than 100 days of closing down have resulted in many spoiled food supplies. Opening the door requires the purchase of new supplies. What if it shuts down again? This is a typical mentality. Many factories and brick-and-mortar stores aren't ready to resume operations. Staff organization is complex, material security is hard to guarantee, and logistics delivery is tough. Doing anything costs money. According to information released by the Gansu Provincial Department of Transportation, during the outbreak, about 20,000 people left Xinjiang for Gansu every day. Most of the mainstream consumer groups have either left Xinjiang or are preparing to leave Xinjiang. The winter threshold for construction in Xinjiang was October 31st, and it is now early December. There is no longer any point in resuming work in construction-related industries such as building materials, furniture, and home appliances. Even if all restrictions are lifted, apart from vegetable markets, supermarkets, barber stores, and auto repair industries resuming regular business, there are few other industries and fields left with conditions for the resumption of work. Just today, Urumqi Yaxin Life Plaza announced the closure of the business. Before that, nearly 10 large department stores closed one after another, and the department store industry has almost been wiped out this winter. Their closure meant hundreds of people lost their hard-earned money, and thousands of people lost their jobs. How many people are left shivering in the cold this winter? According to reports, the growth of per capita income of residents in Urumqi was among the highest in the country in the first 3 quarters. After the outbreak, people have become indifferent to this figure because it doesn't matter whether they believe it or not, as most people are locked up at home and can't go out. No one knows where the growth comes from. What they know is whether they are sick and have money in their pockets. Currently, residents in some neighborhoods are able to go downstairs and vehicles can go out. However, there are few pedestrians on the streets. The city is left in a sad scene as if it had just been hit by a catastrophe. The people who now have gained their freedom don't experience much joy, but rather a more profound sense of confusion and sorrow. 3 years have passed, and we have used up our life savings, wondering what we are going to do tomorrow. We don't know what to do, or what we can do. People walking on the road are at a loss. 2023 is going to be the most miserable Chinese New Year in the lifetime of our generations. This is a snapshot of what is happening in cities across China. Since the outbreak in early 2020, the CCP has resorted to city lockdowns, mass nucleic acid testing, and strict zero-COVID border control in an attempt to contain the spread. Unlike foreign countries where government health departments are in charge of epidemic prevention, the CCP's zero-COVID policy is a movement initiated by the CCP's central government and party organizations at the grassroots level. The 3-year-long zero-COVID policy has cost China dearly. In the time that follows, let's take stock of what it has brought to China. Simply put, it started with the closure of a massive number of small and medium-sized enterprises, the withdrawal of foreign capital, and the bursting of the real estate bubble. The zero-COVID policy and lockdown measures first affected the service industry, then the manufacturing sector, and finally, the high-end industries. An analysis by Song Zheng, a professor in the Department of Economics at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and others, found that if the city is closed for 2 weeks, the economic loss caused is about 32% of the city's GDP that month. If a 2-week city closure is imposed on a megacity like Beijing or Shanghai, the impact on the GDP for all of China for that month is roughly around 2 percentage points. If 1/10 of China's cities were forced to close their cities for 2 weeks, China's GDP could lose 3.1% for that month. The International Monetary Fund expects China's economy to grow by a rare 3.2% this year, below the world average. The CCP has set a growth target of 5.5% for 2022. On November 30th, China's National Bureau of Statistics released data showing the release of economic data for November. The data showed that activity indicators for China's manufacturing, service, and construction sectors deteriorated more than expected in November, a sign of weakening economic output. Specifically, China's Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, fell 1.2 percentage points to 48% in November from 49.2% in October, the lowest level in 7 months. An index below 50% indicates a contraction in manufacturing activity. The National Statistics Bureau also said the non-manufacturing PMI, which covers activity in the service and construction sectors, also fell in November to 46.7% from 48.7%, also the lowest level in 7 months. The value was below the threshold, indicating that the level of the non-manufacturing economy has declined. New home sales continued to fall in November for the 17th consecutive month of year-over-year declines. According to industry data provider China Property Information Group, sales by China's top 100 developers fell 25.5%, or about $78 billion. Data shows that total sales for the first 11 months of the year fell 42.6% year-over-year. Shana Yue, a China economist at Capital Economics, said in a research paper on November 30th that downside risks continue to increase as China's viral situation continues to worsen, putting heavy pressure on the economy even into 2023. Reuters recently reported that many companies, especially direct-to-consumer Chinese companies, say they will have difficulty surviving into next year. The article describes the example of Lost Plate, run by Brian Berge and his wife, Rui Shi Hu. Since 2015, the Berges hosted Lost Plate tours in several cities, including Beijing, Chengdu, and Shanghai, where they took their clients on a journey through the streets to taste various snacks and experience local culture. Now they are packing their bags and preparing to move to Southeast Asia. Camden Hauge, an American entrepreneur living in Shanghai, also told reporters, "The biggest thing will be to see in February and March who was actually able to survive the winter." Hauge owns a cafe, a bar, several matcha kiosks, and an events company in Shanghai. Zero-COVID policies have led to the withdrawal of foreign investment. In June, an American Chamber of Commerce in China survey showed that 44% of respondents said they had reduced or postponed their investments in China because of COVID-19 restrictions. 1 in 10 said that if the restrictions continue for another year, it will prompt them to move their operations out of China. Another survey released in the same month by the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China showed that nearly a quarter of companies are considering moving current or planned investments to other countries because of the lockdowns. The zero-COVID control measures have devastated investor confidence in the West, and global stocks plunged on November 28th. Wall Street's benchmark Standard & Poor's 500 stock index closed down 1.5%, while the technology-based Nasdaq Composite Index fell 1.6%. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng China Enterprises Index fell 1.6% and the Shanghai Shenzhen 300 Index of stocks dropped 1%. An analyst at StoneX, a leading U.S. brokerage and financial services firm, said in a report that investors are concerned about the declining liquidity of the Chinese economy and fear more COVID-19 related shutdowns. The zero-COVID policy has also reduced China's influence internationally, especially in Hong Kong, which is a financing center. On September 23, 2022, the latest edition of the Global Financial Center Index, published by the UK-based Z Yen Group and the China Shenzhen Institute of Comprehensive Development, showed that Hong Kong fell from 3rd to 4th place. Also on September 21, 2022, Willie Walsh, Director General of the International Air Transport Association, said that the Chinese Communist Party's harsh zero-COVID policy had destroyed Hong Kong's status as a global aviation hub and it will be difficult to recover. The CCP's zero-COVID policy has also had a significant impact on the global economy. Alicia Garcia Herrero, a senior researcher at Bruegel, an independent European think tank, and chief economist for Asia-Pacific at Natixis, writes that China's zero-COVID policy could have a more significant impact on the global economy than the Russia-Ukraine war because China's economy is 10 times larger than Russia's. A prolonged disruption of Chinese manufacturing would have a major impact on the global economy as China exports 1/3 of the world's intermediate goods. A prime case in point is Apple Inc. The protests at Foxconn's Zhengzhou plant have affected iPhone production and could end Apple's 14 consecutive quarters of growth ahead of the peak holiday season. The plant, which employs 200,000 workers, suffered a series of production disruptions after an outbreak and lockdown in October. It's the world's largest iPhone foundry, accounting for 70% of global iPhone shipments. On November 6th, Apple issued a rare warning that Foxconn's Zhengzhou plant was experiencing a significant drop in production capacity for the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max models. Foxconn has shifted some of its iPhone production to other factories in China, but has struggled to make up for the shortfall from the Zhengzhou plant. According to Counterpoint Research, customers who buy Apple's most premium devices in the US in 2022 can expect to wait up to 37 days, nearly double the amount of time they waited a month ago. Bloomberg previously reported that Apple is currently expected to face a shortage of 6 million iPhone Pro units this year due to these events. For Apple, cutting production by 6 million phones ahead of the holiday season is a big hole. Visible Alpha has pulled data from various banks to project that iPhone production could be cut by 8 million to 10 million units because of the incident at the Zhengzhou plant. According to the Financial Times, Evercore ISI lowered its revenue forecast for Apple's current quarter by $8 billion to $122 billion on November 28th, $2 billion less than the $124 billion it reported a year ago. This marks the first quarterly revenue decline year over year Apple may face since early 2019. According to a Reuters analysis, China's weight in Apple's global supply chain has been declining. In the 5 years to 2019, 44 to 47% of Apple's major suppliers were based in China. That percentage, however, drops to 41% in 2020 and further to 36% in 2021. An analyst at investment bank D.A. Davidson said Apple's biggest challenge is that they're not moving fast enough from China, a major production hub, to diversify their production lines. The CCP's zero-COVID policy has also fueled U.S. inflation to some extent. David Dollar, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution who focuses on U.S.-China economic relations, told ABC, "The main impact of China's zero-COVID policy has been to disrupt some supply chains. We still import a lot of stuff from China, and those problems in the supply chain mean there's a shortage of commodities, which adds some inflationary pressure. So is there any unexpected gain for China from its 3-year-long zero-COVID policy? There is actually one, and it is a black swan event. On September 5, 2021, after the flag-raising ceremony, a black swan made a rare landing in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, sparking public speculation. What would happen in the future that would have enough impact to constitute a significant black swan event? Now we see that the recent white paper revolution is precisely that, a black swan. On November 24th, at least 10 people were burned to death in their apartments in Urumqi after tight epidemic control measures led to delays in fire truck rescues. Starting on November 26th, sporadic protests gradually spread to major cities across China and the world. Small-scale local protests are not uncommon in China, but in most cases they are scattered, isolated, and without national influence. They protest over economic and human rights issues while also demonstrating no intention to offend the Communist Party. However, this event, known as the White Paper Revolution or White Paper Movement, is unusual in that it quickly turned into a national and global event with large numbers of people taking to the streets with blank A4 sheets of paper. While the primary purpose of protests in many cities has been to call for an end to the strict zero-COVID policy, in Beijing, Shanghai, and some overseas protests, people have openly chanted the slogans, "Down with the Communist Party," "Down with Xi Jinping." It has been 33 years since the Communist Party has faced an actual national protest, a massive and united protest unprecedented since the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. Arguably, this is the biggest crisis for Xi Jinping, who has just won his third term in office since he took power in 2012. During this white paper revolution, many people began to speak to the police and the epidemic prevention officers in white protective clothing about the law and common sense. In the process, the Chinese people have gradually figured out some basic issues, such as that the police don't have the power to stop people on the street and check their cell phones at will, or the residents' committees don't have the administrative power to lock down neighborhoods, or that the communist elites and their related institutions have neither produced nor invented anything for the society, but are parasites of the society.
You have a salary. Common folks rely on their savings. People are supporting you. Do you know that? What are you? You are parasites. You eat us, skin us, drink our blood, and eat our flesh. Don't you?
The people are also becoming more aware that their enemy is not the anti-Chinese forces from abroad that the Communist Party has been propagating for a long time, but exists from within, that is, a harmful ideology that the Communist Party has indoctrinated into their minds. I have just received news that we should be aware that there are anti-Chinese forces from abroad among our masses in our surroundings. We are all Chinese. We are all patriotic Chinese. Are you referring to the foreign forces of Marx and Engels? Is it Marx and Engels? Is it Stalin? Is it Lenin? Is Marx a Chinese? I will always love my country, I love our people, and I, too, think there is something wrong with the current policy. Don't change the subject. May I ask, was the fire in Xinjiang set by foreign forces? What about the bus that was pulling away people for quarantine in Guizhou? Was it tipped over by foreign forces? I'd like to ask, are we all sent here by foreign forces? No, we are not. We don't even have access to the internet outside of China. How can we reach the foreign power? How can the foreign power communicate with us? We only have inland forces here that won't let us rally. Can we leave the country or can we access the internet outside the country? Neither. How can they contact us? Where did the foreign powers come from? We just want to be free. The flames of this white paper movement may be extinguished soon, but judging by the spread of protests to more than 20 cities in China, The fires could resurface in different forms at any time in the future when China is finally unblocked. Perhaps the CCP could follow suit with the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre and suppress the white paper movement with tanks, but the young people of modern China are already awakening. In contrast to those days, they are familiar with the internet and can turn a weak protest into a thunderous tsunami at the touch of a button.